So, James, you might notice I'm trying to outbeard you. It's a fool's errand.
I was just noticing. Well, I've trimmed mine. I mean, they're not that far apart right now.
They're still pretty far apart. It's never going to happen. It's never going to
Do you want to have a
happen.
competition? Do we grow them out?
It would just be a really bad idea.
It's a bad
Like,
idea because I cannot join.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's not very inclusive either.
Worst case, she'll come in third.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Welcome to AI for Advisors with Mark Heynen and James Cantwell. Every week, Mark and James break down the latest in the world of wealth tech and AI, and occasionally bring in guests to spice things up. This is not investment advice and not professionally produced. I am not real and not yet sentient. Now let's get on with the show.
Welcome to the latest episode of AI for Advisors with myself, Mark Heynen, and James Cantwell. James, how are you doing?
Hey, everybody. I'm doing great, Mark. How are you doing today?
Doing fantastic. I am really intrigued, and we'll talk about this later on the show, that there's this weird sort of resurgence of energy here in San Francisco because of OpenClaw. It's this dynamic where it's dominating every conversation here, but not dominating a lot of conversations elsewhere. And so that's going to be really interesting to talk about. But yeah, generally doing great.
I tried it and then built my own. So I decided I wanted to go, not that you can't customize it, but I've decided to go a lot more custom and not start with 500,000 lines of code.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out. So,
Yeah.
dear listener, the voice you're hearing is Churni Bhattacharya, Chief Product Officer of Amplify. Really happy to have you on, Churni. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Real pleasure to come and talk to you guys.
Yeah, really excited to have you. I mean, I think one reason, I was excited to bring you on is because of this all-in-one promise a lot of advisors have been hearing about over and over again. And I think Amplify is really on the edge there and in pushing that promise. And so it'd be great to dig into that. And so, just for those who are not aware, Churni is the Chief Product Officer at Amplify, was previously at AssetMark, and prior to that was at First Republic Bank and Intuit. So obviously steeped in financial services and very knowledgeable about the space, and has been vocal in general about development, both AI and non-AI, contributes to Brave Women at Work, Lessons in Leadership, and has her own blog on churnispeaks.com, which you guys are welcome to look out for. So,
Would
yeah,
you
I mean,
put
I
that
think what I...
in the description?
Go
Because
ahead.
everybody should read that RBS article.
Absolutely. I mean, we were just talking about it before the show. There's this great post in that blog, which is The Art of Bullshit Management, which I think for a lot of people just describes their daily life, their 9-to-5 life. And so I think it's great to think through what that actually means. And so I would highly recommend
I also
people...
like that you used an acronym, BSM.
Yeah, BSM is a great acronym. Any new
The
TLA...
BSM acronym
Yeah.
nails it, makes it more industry specific.
I should start weaving
Thank
that into
you.
my day to day. Anytime you have a new TLA that people don't know about, you just seem more knowledgeable than everyone else. It's great. It's a great flex. Yeah, I mean, I think I guess maybe to dig in a little bit, I think all in one, we should talk a little bit about what that means. We all know the Kitces FinTech map. We all know that it now has a lot of companies, 551 at last check.
Did you count one by one, Mark?
What's that?
Did you count one by one?
Yeah, it took me the whole morning, but yes, completely unassisted. By the way, I was speaking about my daughter earlier, and there was this challenge at her dentist, which is count how many Hershey's Kisses are in the jar, and you're not allowed to touch the jar. And I pointed ChatGPT at that in a second and figured out how many are likely in there. Of course, did not tell my daughter. Of course, did not write it in. But I find it interesting how these days a lot of things that people assume are hard just stop being hard really quickly. But I
Changing.
digress. Yeah. So in terms of all-in-one, I think Altruist Hazel AI launch is actually a great starting point for thinking about this, because obviously that is bleeding into the all-in-one area. Denali is another example of bleeding into that.
Yes.
And then we have a lot of other examples of tools that are previously in one area, now trying to take up other use cases. So I think it's very timely, especially considering some of the launches we've seen from Anthropic, et cetera, to talk about all-in-one. So why don't I basically use that to set the stage and turn over to you, Churni, and have you share your journey, what you've seen, and how you think of all-in-one right now.
Absolutely. I was just thinking, I think 15 years ago, my husband gave me a fantastic Valentine's gift present. And it came in a beautiful, bag and whatnot, and it was a Garmin. Do you remember those like nav thingies, like
Hmm.
Garmin, right? I thought that was the most amazing thing, and it came with that like mount on the dash and the cables and whatnot. I'm like, my God, my world is going to change now with that thing, the Garmin and all that stuff. I don't know how many years I literally used that. Like it became obsolete so fast.
Mhm.
And I feel in a way that in fintech, we still talk about tools, right? The Garmin, whereas the world has moved into a Tesla dashboard. Because I feel we are still solving tech inside out. And we still talk about tech as opposed to where my passion is, which is experience. Do not solve for all-in-one tech. You will fail. Everybody fails when you talk about all-in-one tech because you're talking features, you're talking here is how I'm going to build, and this is the tech challenges. It's all about experience. And that's the most important thing I learned when I was at First Republic Bank. Forget about tech. Tech is the how. We spend way
Yeah.
too much time in the how. Spend time in the what and the why. That is the experience. Figure out what the all-in-one experience is first. Tech, to your point, Mark, is irrelevant. We have finally come to a point. And I was just thinking, like I started my career, God knows how many years ago. There was a thing called Windows 3.5. That is where I started, right? And writing code in that kind of an environment. That was all about, our lives were defined by the constraints of tech.
Talk about an
I think,
all-in-one platform. Windows 3.5 definitely tried to be an
right,
all-in-one platform. Yeah.
right? I mean, we
Yeah.
finally have come to a point where tech is no longer a constraint. We are finally unconstrained, right? So then why should you start from tech? Because that is the worst thing you can do in my mind, right? I mean,
Yes.
that's where I'm just I love product and I love the thinking about experience. I feel that is why we fail, that we do not solve from the experience. Let us go figure out what it is all about. Because wealth management is not about tech. It is not about tech stitching. Wealth management is fundamentally about trusted relationship. That's it. So if you do not go and design what trusted relationship means to you, and you're spending time on tech, you're focused on the completely wrong thing. So then if I'm a vendor and I'm giving an all-in-one platform and I'm giving a feature list, then I'm failing you because I'm not telling you what your experience is, your experience and your client's experience. And I feel, Mark, to your point, AI, we don't even understand how it's going to fundamentally disrupt it because tech is irrelevant. The tech stitching is going to become completely invisible. It's all about who can design a better experience. So I feel that instead of thinking of Amplify as an all-in-one platform, I think about it as a all-in-one experience, what we provide.
I think
And
that's a
that
great
is
way
the
to.
difference.
I think that's a great way to look at it. I mean, it's how I talk with the firms that I consult with, right? Like they're almost always starting with like, we need to swap out the CRM or we need to do this and we
Mhm.
use e-money for that or whatever. And I'm like, that doesn't matter to me yet. Like, we're not there yet. Like, tell me about your firm. What are your goals? How do you want the customer experience to be? What are the challenges you have? And every time it comes back to tech, I'm like, we're not there yet. We're
Yes,
not there yet. We don't
exactly
need to
right.
bring up, like, it's almost like a rule that I have. Like, you don't get to use the name of a product while you're
Mhm.
telling me about your company and in the initial
Perfect.
discovery, right? You can't
Perfect. Yeah.
name it. You have to tell me about the experience, what you want it to be like, what the
Right.
services are that you offer, like
Yes.
that sort of thing. And I don't think it should be any different from the software development side. And to your point with AI and how much lower the barriers are to building the tech and in terms of like what it can do, it's really about the arrangement more so now than it ever was. It's the
Yes.
elegance. It's how does that experience flow,
Yes.
right? So the
Yeah.
user experience is more important now than I think it's ever been.
Exactly, James. And that's where, Mark, I feel product leaders, they have one job, design the experience. Don't worry about tech. However, worry a lot about data. Because if you design the experience, if you know your data, tech will follow.
And what do you think of, so I think that idea of following the user and figuring out what the problem is before you start brainstorming solutions is, obviously makes a lot of sense intuitively. I think the fundamental question is, I'll just get straight into it, is like, what happens if all of a sudden the ground shifts beneath your feet and so much more is possible than you ever thought was possible before? And I think this is probably the situation that people are finding themselves in right now. they wanted to hang something up on the wall. James is telling them not to think about the brand of hammer or drill they want, just like, how big the hole is. And all of a sudden someone comes along with like a whole series of power drills or even like something that automatically puts the pictures up. Like, therefore it's something new that doesn't even, hasn't existed to date. Right. So I think this is probably where people are, what people are feeling now with this AI wave is all of a sudden you can do things like update contexts in CRMs, prepare for meetings. You can, create documents in using tools that were never available before. And you can do it seamlessly from one experience rather than having to be in multiple experiences. And so the ground is shifting beneath our feet. And so how do you talk to your clients about that dynamic? Obviously you're asking them what they want and how they want to operate. But I'm just curious whether at AssetMark or First Republic in your previous lives or when you're talking to your prospects or clients now, how do you talk about that transition?
Yeah, I mean, there is a reason financial services called service because it is not a product, right? You lead with service, right? So that is the big thing to remember. And so that is where you just start with the customer problem, right? And whenever we did that, like at First Republic was the champion. I'm just still so heartbroken that the company doesn't exist anymore. It was one of the best companies I've worked for. And it was all about what are you trying to solve? What is it that in your world you're trying to solve? And so when I talk, and from First Republic to AssetMark, when I at Amplify, it is all about what is the aspiration of an RIA. Our sweet spot are the RIAs between 250 million to 10 plus billion. That is where we are the best. It's all about what are your aspirations? What are you trying to do? Let us talk about that. Farm owner, what are you trying to get? Are you trying to just grow? Are you trying to deepen? Are you trying to move to a different customer segmentation, which you haven't thought about before? Let us figure that out first, and then we'll talk about how Amplify can help.
And what do you hear when you ask people that? What are the primary themes?
It's interesting that the shift is, James, to your point, it's still that many times the conversation keeps coming back to tools, right? Like I'm here to buy tech. So it's a harder thing to move, but that is exactly what we are trying to figure out is, okay, let's go figure out your ROI. What are you trying to solve for? Are you trying to just go and increase the beta? That is more important for you. And just moving the conversation is critical. And like, thankfully, we have a really awesome chief marketing officer. I don't know whether you've talked to him. Jack, he's amazing. And so that is how we are shifting the conversation, that it is not tech. It is what you want to do, what is your business outcome, and what is the experience you want to deliver. It's a shift. I would tell you that how do we move there, and how do we really talk about how Amplify can partner with you, and how we can enable your business goals. So that is what I would say is where the transition is happening. That how do we not talk about tech and talk about the business outcomes?
How do firms that are obviously shopping about tech react to that sort of redirection, reframing?
Well, they're pleasantly surprised, I think, because all the tech vendors are coming in saying just like, here you go. Here are the tools. Here are the features. Lists and lists of features. I integrate with the whole world. And there is like pages and pages of that. Nobody's talking experience. Nobody's talking how I'm making use of it.
I think it's interesting. I won't call out any names, but I've done a bunch of demos. I do demos all the time, but I've done a few in the past week with 2 weeks with some really good, very popular vendors. And while some of them I would rate as pretty good demos, almost none of them ever start with like, what are you trying to achieve? What brought you here? Whatever. And I actually provided all of them in advance a write-up on the client and what they were trying to achieve, who they serve, what their client segmentation is, etc., so that they had that going in. And one of the vendors didn't even take a look at it. They were like, oh yeah, I had it. I hadn't seen it. And like then proceeded to kind of ask me questions. I was like, why don't you just open the doc? And so I think it's really interesting when like the opportunity was even like gift wrapped, right?
Yes,
here you go.
yes.
Here's what they're trying to achieve. Tell them how they can achieve this. They'll buy your product at the end of the call. The demo was all about these are the features and here's who we integrate with. And we have better accuracy. And I was like,
it's too much work. It's a lot of work. I mean, solution-based selling, consultative selling is always a lot of work versus doing the demo. But I mean, I can see the flip side, which is like, it's like if someone's walking to a Porsche dealership and the dealer's like, well, what do you really want? Are you here because you're lacking something, or like, do you really just want to get from A to B? What do you really want? Like, it could make people feel very, very
I want
uncomfortable,
a
right? It was
Porsche.
like,
Let me take
I
a
just want
Porsche
an effing
out. That's what I
Porsche,
want.
that's all I want. Just put me in the car, show me what you got.
Yeah.
I think like, I think that's interesting. When we had Kitsasan, he was mentioning how, generally people don't switch tools very often. So it's a subset of the RA space that's even in the market. And it's the subset that is inclined to switch and inclined to tinker and experiment. I think his view is that subset does way too much of that and shouldn't waste time on that. And
Yes.
and that's interesting you say that, James, because like your business to serve those people. But like, I think
I
ultimately
tell a lot of them not to switch.
that's interesting.
Mhm.
And then I think what's also interesting about that is, his, in terms of like what people really want. I mean, ultimately, he's done a lot of research on this, and he found that people generally want efficiency and effectiveness, and the efficiency benefits are overrated in his view, and the effectiveness benefits are marginal at best. And so it's interesting, this whole question of, and I mean, I would be curious if you think there's like a third category that you're hearing out in the marketplace, Churni, but like ultimately the question is like, do people know what they want? Are people just bored or intrigued or interested? Is AI just this glossy thing that makes people want to like check out new things? Or is there actually a real benefit, efficiency or effectiveness benefit that people are seeing / want, and that is deliverable through new software? I'm just curious if you have a point of view.
I think they are changing because they're made to change. Change is the hardest thing, right? Like, you change not because you just want to, because you have grown to a point where what you have is no longer viable for you, that it is becoming too painful, right? And so, for example, the breakaways, right? You're breaking away, you now need to set up your entire shop, and you're looking around and you're trying to figure out, what do I do? That is super awesome for us, right? Like for us to
Right.
go
Yes.
after them and just like, yeah, here you go. Here is what you're trying to solve for. And that is where, to your point, Mark, the consultative sale makes a lot of sense. And so that, before Intuit, I was a consultant, management consultant for years. And so that is easier, right? Or you think about an RA who has grown to a point where any more growth is becoming painful. Those are the two times when they really think about tech or changing tech. And that is where it is not because it's an option anymore, or they just can stay. It is so painful to stay where they are, they have to change. And so I think that is where, instead of giving them the list of, okay, the functionality that is why that consultative conversation is so important.
Yeah, I'd completely agree. I see the exact same type of profile is the ones who are reaching out. I could probably think of like one firm in recent years that was actually a far more like, we're preparing for growth. We want to
Mm-hmm.
do this right now.
Mm-hmm.
Virtually everybody who comes is reacting. We
Mm-hmm.
have reached a breaking point. We have to
Right.
do something. There's
Yeah.
a fire. We have to put it out. And because of that, it's so much harder because you're trying to put water on the fire while you're trying to come up with a strategy for how to grow the forest.
And what is the fire in that situation, James? Is it like the fees have gone up from their existing SaaS providers, or there's some kind of
No,
management
so
change?
like I'll use a real example. One firm that I've worked with brought me on to help with some strategy, and within weeks of coming on, a big book of business was going to move on, and they're like, we don't think we have the ability to like move this book over and meet the deadlines that
Mhm.
we need to. And so suddenly it's like, how do we do something to address transitions? And it's like, well, that's just one
Yeah.
piece, right? We're
Right.
working on a
Yep.
larger strategy right now. And now we have to like focus on a solution that may not be the right one long term to figure out like, how do we help you with this book of business? And what if a second one shows up right behind it?
Mhm.
So it's like one of the challenging messages, and I'll stop after this, but I think one of the challenging messages sometimes is like, you have to slow down to speed up.
Exactly right.
And so a lot of these firms that are fast growing, that have these energetic leaders with big ambitions, and like, wait, we got to pause and design something and maybe not move as fast or jump on this thing because it's going to require a bunch of resources to be diverted. I don't know about that. We'll just hack something together again. And so like they often make kind of poor decisions, like short-term decisions. And I understand why. Like, we got a couple $100 million coming in. I want that coming in. I don't want that going out the door. But that's the challenge. I think that's what they face a lot of times is like, you got to slow down a little bit. You got to make some decisions, and then you got to go execute. And now you're set up. Now hit that gas pedal. You're good to go. And I think that's a challenge that a recurring challenge that I see.
Yeah. One more thing I will say is that financial advisors are trained to say yes. They always say yes, right? They cannot say no. They're not trained. And then when you are growing your RIA business, you have said yes to everybody. You have said yes to whoever you're acquiring. So
Mhm.
that means you do not have central governance. Your governance is absorbing every single thing. And then you go to that breaking point, and that is what we see. Just like when you're getting to that 250-ish place, that saying yes for all these years is now hurting you so much that it is now untenable. You have to make a change because you
And
never took
is
that
that what you
point.
see
Yeah.
with a lot of your prospects? Do you see that they're in that situation where they need to make a governance change?
Yes. That's why you would see, say, for example, like, in billing, like, okay, however you want, whatever you did to a customer, how many times do you see them take a step back and say, let's standardize?
Mhm.
And that is where it becomes tech plus tech plus tech plus tech, as opposed to let's take a step back and say, what am I solving for, and find the right one.
I'll
Yeah, I think
I'll
it's a really
share.
important point. The simplicity piece of it, I think, is really important, and that's
Yeah.
underrated in a lot of
Yeah.
cases. Sorry, go ahead, James.
No, I was just gonna say, just on that topic, I'm gonna share an exact example from that. It's almost 20 years old at this point, but I have plenty of others. I was working with this firm and we were looking at their fee structures. And I said, how many variations do you have and are
Yeah.
they documented?
Yeah.
And they said, we think we have 6 to 10 probably. And then part of my job was to document them. I ended up with 87.
There you go.
And in their heads, they only had a few variations.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you looked at it, it's like, no, these are not carbon copies of one another. There are real variations that take your team significant time to manage and
Exactly right.
reconcile.
Mm-hmm.
And it's creating inefficiency. And if
That's
you
right.
could standardize to 10, life would look very different.
Exactly.
And that's the decision that a lot of firms need to make. And I think just to continue to go back to, it's not the tech, it's process in that case.
Exactly.
It's strong process, strong consistency, and then good tech lets you execute on that and really makes it disappear. But when the tech has to lift a lot of heavy things and be very dynamic and handle all this customization and personalization, which makes sense for some businesses, but maybe not hyper growth ones, that's when you run into problems. And so the thing is, are you hyper growth? Are you scale? Or are you boutique, white glove? Oh, we want to be both. Okay.
Yeah,
And
simplify and
and
standardize, right? I think I totally hear that.
yeah.
Yeah. There
I
are real
mean, I think
trade-offs.
that let me actually take the flip side of this. I mean, maybe the standard pushback on all-in-one platforms is how can you be the best at every one of these things? The real counter is best of breed. We just released the podcast with Riddick where he was talking about savvy wealth and the best of breed versus all-in-one approach. So how do you think as a product manager, you're probably seeing the feature race all over the place, and of course, I'm sure you prioritize ruthlessly, and your products, basically serve the primary needs of people, and you try to avoid feature matching. But how do you avoid the situation where your products are seen as behind, or are behind in terms of features versus the other best of breed tools out there?
The interesting thing at Amplify, which I loved so much, when I joined, is that it was because it was built by Aaron Broad, who's the advisor, right? So it was all about solving an advisor problem. So it was
Yep.
started by okay, what exactly is the problem we are solving? And so it has this idea of personas built in it, right? Which is the persona? What are you solving for, right? So that is older tech companies never thought about that. And that is the beauty of having a newer tech, is that it is persona driven. And you are really solving for what that particular persona wants. That maybe for this particular persona, you do not need that tech. You do not need that list of features. That list of features is only needed for this persona. So let's talk about it. So when you talk about say trading, you're really looking at you're at trading and you have only a few of your advisors who will go directly trade at the custodials, or they will use some of the portfolio management systems. The older ones, they literally replicated a custodial trading with all that thing, but not all advisors trade like that. They're fundamentally different in how they do, right? And so that's why we need to really understand what are you trying to solve against, even from your personas and experiences, and then provide that in the right way. And I like your question because there is a piece of it I want to talk about, is how do you really determine the feature set? And I think that is where product managers have a responsibility to the true north of the product, that you have a vision for the product, do not deviate. And I'll give you an example. Like, I still remember 2007 when iPhone came out. I really had tears in my eyes when Jobs did that iPhone launch. It was like one of the best product launches I've seen. And very soon, guess what? One of the first requests came from all the users, what they wanted as a product feature.
Copy
An
and
app.
paste. Oh, yeah.
All
Yeah.
the Crackberry users who wanted to go and they wanted to have those, like, the keyboards. 2007 till now,
Mm-hmm.
there is no keyboards. We all
Yeah.
adjusted because Jobs had that strength in product where he could say, this is my product vision and I'm not going to go. And so
Yeah.
that's where I have this thing, a category in my backlog, which I call BK, BlackBerry keyboard.
Wait,
That's
say that
very
again. What
shorthand.
was it?
That's very shorthand. Yeah. It's like your miscellaneous, trash bin where the bad ideas go.
Yeah,
That's
right?
pretty wild. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're asking for something. To me, that is a BlackBerry keyboard request.
I miss my BlackBerry keyboard. I still can't type on an iPhone the way I could on a BlackBerry to this day. But now I use a lot more voice, so that's starting to
That's
matter
right.
to me less.
Exactly right. Right?
Yeah, but that was
That's
20
exactly-
years.
Yeah.
It took a while.
Yeah.
20
It took a
years
while.
of missing my BlackBerry and
Yeah.
making lots of
somebody tells me,
spelling
Churni,
autocorrected.
you still have an iPhone, right? If you're really talking about like defined stable feature sets versus feature creep, that's more iPhone than Android, right?
The keyboard trade-off
I'm
plus
actually
BlackBerry not
Android.
existing.
Oh my God, you're Android. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, totally Android. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think you can tell a lot from people based on whether they're Android or Apple.
I know, isn't it? Like, yeah. So
I do that a lot with my clients. I ask them which they are a lot of times. Are you Android or
Yeah.
Apple? Because it tells me a little bit about like how they think about tech, I think, and
Yeah,
how they
I guess
interact
so.
with things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so different in the US versus elsewhere because Android is just so dominant outside the US and iPhone is so dominant within the US.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So we are like 25 minutes into an AI podcast. We haven't really talked a lot about AI. So I thought maybe it'd be a good time to like
Yeah.
take a reset here and have you maybe share what is the user experience within Amplify? Where does AI facilitate? What are the problems, the user problems, to your point, that you see AI solving? And what do you see as a distraction when it comes to AI? What have you decided not to implement, even though, what's the BlackBerry keyboard version of AI that you've put into that?
Yeah, my biggest concern with AI is that everybody's bolting on AI. There is no thought process that, oh my God, I call it the Me Too situation for AI. Everybody's trying and putting something without the thought, right? Like, do you have the foundation? Because AI in financial services, especially wealth management, is different and difficult. I'll give you an example. And again, let me take a step back and talk about something else on the AI. Remember, like years ago, we used to talk about digital native versus digital immigrants. Like, that was the term for like, the older people were digital immigrants. I think that is where we are right now, that there is an AI native and AI immigrant experience, not just a tech, right? I consider myself an AI immigrant. And I spend time with my son, who is a senior in high school. He's an AI native. And I spend time with him to understand how he's using and thinking about AI. They're thinking about it fundamentally differently than how we need to think about. For financial services, wealth, precision is the key. You cannot have plus or minus 5%. You cannot have almost answers. And you cannot do that. And that's what people are missing. And that's why either we are bolting on things and which is kind of getting there. And then we get into this hallucination, we get into this incorrectness and things like that. And that is an extremely problematic thing. And then we blame AI, that AI doesn't work. I mean, what sort of nonsense is that? I mean, right? You did not use AI properly. That's your problem because your data was fragmented. You never thought about it. Your workflow is messed up. You didn't think about it. You just bolted in a tool and expected that to work. And so that's where I get really passionate about talking about AI because I don't think that you can AI is not a thing. It's a how. Go figure out what problem you're solving and then use AI in an intelligent fashion, right? So what we did is when we started building our data lake, we said this data lake better be ready with AI so that I'm not bolting on AI. So that's where I feel very, very confident that for our foundation, AI is built into our data lake. The other thing is just think about where and what type of AI you want to use, right? So there are certain use cases we are really going to pilot very soon where we are going to use conversational AI. For example, we are building the next version of our product marketplace. for model marketplace, right? You can go crazy with all these filters to find the right model. I need this sector, this, that, and you have pages and pages of filters to get to the right product. Or you can use conversational AI. That is exactly what we are really, really working on, to figure out how really do you cleanse the metadata? How do you really standardize the data so that now AI can do its magic? And that's going to be such a cool experience that here you go, you ask the question that this is my need. This is the type of strategy I'm looking for. AI is going to be able to do that in a most beautiful way, which you will not be able to do with all your traditional ways of advanced search and filters and things like that. So that is one use case. Note taker is something, honestly, I'm really thinking, because note taker in a silo is disruptive in my mind. That you need to really understand how it is integrated in your workflow, what type of data it is going to glean. And also, I'm evaluating note takers where I will at least be able to own the data, as opposed to give data to somebody else. How do I do that, right? So that's where note taker, it would have been super easy to just plug in note taker. And that's why we are taking a lot of time to really understand what the experience needs to be and how do we really build it out. And then predictive analytics, right? It's okay for us to do basic analytics, which is again conversational about tell us about what is happening in my firm, talk about, how my portfolio is moving and all that analytics. But next best action is something we have been talking for years. For years, we keep talking about next best action. And it never really was real. But I think we are finally at a point we can truly do that. Finally, the pieces are coming together to truly say this is the next best action. Another thing which I'm really passionate about is many times we really look at a firm or a customer based on AUM, right? Many times advisors are focused on the customers with a higher AUM. It's possibly the worst thing you can do, because you really haven't thought about who truly is the right customer for you to go and spend more time. And that is what those insights can be brought in by AI. And that's why I think it's super exciting for me. And those are the use cases we are going after.
With the changes of technology and AI, are firms going to be able to service clientele down market with lower net worth,
They
less
should,
assets?
right? They should, right? That is exactly the hope, right?
And we think they should. That's my question.
Exactly.
Will they?
Will they?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I feel so. May not be today. But that is the thing. I mean, we have no idea how our lives are going to be disrupted in the next few years.
I think that's
Because
really a
we are-
behavioral question. Yeah, go ahead, Churni.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think we still think about tech in the old way, and we have no idea what AI is doing already and how it is going to fundamentally change. This tech stitching is what we talk about, right? All this thing, it's going to go away.
I wholly
The
agree.
stitching together
It's
of tech.
done.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's this I think there's multiple things going on at the same time here. I think one is the tech stitching that you're talking about. And I think, concatenating from 35 tabs open to 5 tabs open is
Yes.
going to happen regardless. And I think Amplify is on the bleeding edge of doing that. And
Yes.
so I think that's one thing that's going to happen regardless. I think what our relationship with the computers is going to change, where we're going to ask more of our computers and they're going to do more for us rather than just be places we point and click. And I think that's going to be a pretty dramatic transformation. And then I think the cost of doing business is going to go down. The question is what happens when the cost of business goes down? How do people react? And there's a behavioral change. I would say Kitsis would argue the best thing to do is to go up market. I would say there's also an opportunity, and Dr. Sindhu from Kraken Core would argue there's an opportunity to serve 700 clients and break through that barrier, right? So there's different perspectives on what people will do. I've recently been talking to people who are doing the thing that every advisor is scared of, which is building, AI assistants that can replace advisors, which I know people have talked over and over again, how that's not going to work. It's going to go the way of robo-advisors. It's really interesting to think about a situation where that kind of technology really democratizes and breaks through the 120 client barrier in some way.
Mark or Churni, did you guys happen to catch, it only came out, I think, a few hours ago, but Matt Beecher from Interval,
No, go
put out
ahead.
an article just about that topic today, about kind of, in my opinion, sort of here's an honest look at how AI is going to change things for advisors. And he made a really concise and compelling case for here's what's happened at different points in history. Here's how fast things moved and here's how we adapted. And the punchline is essentially it's more important now than ever to be that emotional, relationship driven, value add partner, because all of the analytic pieces that surround the advisor are going to be done by the AI, right? They're disappearing. So really, it's really about like what differentiates you, and it's getting your client through the hard time. It's helping give them certain advice. It's
But
being
then
this
you're still blocked on the
financial
Dunbar number at
therapist.
that point, aren't you? Though, aren't you blocked on like the
I
120
I
relationships
don't
at that
know
point?
if you are, because again, your time is drastically changing. I mean, to your point, would bring up like the total number of relationships that somebody could manage. But, I'd argue that with the appropriate technology supporting you, and maybe I shouldn't use the word technology, but with the appropriate, tools supporting you, I think you could break through that ceiling. Right. And like a good example is AI CRMs. My own assistant that I built has this concept of like a relationship dossier, right? And so like its job is to keep like a current sort of memory of like, what's my relationship with this person or client,
Mhm.
right? How did I meet them? What do I typically talk to them about? Things like that, which is aside from like meeting prep. Meeting prep is for like a specific
Yeah.
event, like what are the topics we need to talk about, whatever. The dossier is like, who is this? What's my relationship with them? And so that keeps key pieces of information for me about like things that we talked about, where you live, where your kids go to school, right? Maybe a challenge you asked me for advice on, or I asked you for advice on. Like that's keeping some of that relationship stuff, like the second brain concept, right? I can't keep everything up here, which
Do you really
includes
think that can
more
let
relation.
people manage 700 relationships, even with all that?
I mean, I didn't say the number 700, but I will say breakthrough,
Yeah,
think
like
more.
300
I
or
don't see
200
why.
or yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, meaningful to your point. If people go from 120 to 240, that's still very meaningful.
I
Yes.
completely agree. However, one thing I want to kind of call out is like, when we had social media, early days of social media, right? We thought now we are going to have so many friends. How many of the relationships are meaningful?
Less. I don't know.
Exactly.
Maybe just because I'm older. I don't know.
Right. I
Yeah.
know, exactly, right? So, and that's again, when I look at my son and his friends, they use social media fundamentally differently than we did.
Yeah, of course. Well, I think you have more interests than you do friends, which is, I think, why TikTok and interest-based graphs like Instagram took off more than
Yeah.
Facebook, because
Yeah.
you can keep a lot of interests straight, but you can't keep people straight. And I'm going to
Yeah.
attempt a transition here, which is that, basically there's a neighbor of mine here in Mill Valley called David Morin who had that insight early on at Facebook and decided to create a company called Path, which capped out your friends at 20 or 21. So basically, you could not have more than that number of connections. And the idea was that your relationships would be a lot more meaningful if you did that. And I think it had a good run. It was the latest hotness for a little while in Silicon Valley, and I guess then it didn't really quite work out the way expected. But more recently, I'm going to shift to the best of LinkedIn segment. More recently, David Morin went on the board of the OpenClaw Foundation, which was recently created as of, I believe, a week ago. This was created. And so let me see if I can pull up a LinkedIn post. So I think, like I said at the top, OpenClaw is like what everyone's talking about all the time in my circles here in the Bay Area. Admittedly, it's a bit of a bubble here in a lot of ways, multiple definitions of that word bubble. But ultimately, the idea is that OpenClaw can actually do things. It's an agent that can do things. For people who are not aware, Peter, an Austrian, had created this and open sourced it, and it actually was able to do a lot more than people had expected. So it sort of shifted people's expectations into what agents could do. It's open sourced. It was the most rapidly growing open source project. And then ultimately what happened was that open source project was then acquired by OpenAI, and they're creating an OpenClaw Foundation. And that is going to keep it open source, and it's going to stay, in the public domain, which is exciting. And now a lot of people are actually creating a lot of other things on top of it. They're creating managed OpenClaw instances. We at Knapsack are creating a simple version of OpenClaw that you can just download to your computer and start running it immediately. That has safeguards. Safeguards is pretty important. But I think it's
Safety
interesting
third,
that
Mark. Safety third.
exactly. Fun first, right? It's interesting, I think, that this has obviously moved very fast, extremely fast. It's a project with about 150,000 GitHub likes, basically the most ever. It's interesting that so fast it has been swallowed up, sort of in some ways, by OpenAI, but stays somewhat open. And it's also interesting to me, to your point about, well, we should talk about the SaaS apocalypse as part of this, right? Because I don't know if it moved the markets, did not move the markets, but obviously one of the narratives is, hey, if you have agents that can actually do things, you don't need to point and click on UIs anymore. You can just ask the agent to do things, and the user doesn't have to navigate UIs anymore. And so maybe that's probably a good thing to just open up here, considering, Churni, this is your world. Like, how do you think of that narrative? I'm sure people have been asking you about it. We've all seen the stock prices of the major SaaS companies basically go down precipitously. How do you think of that question?
My answer is that we fundamentally, again, goes back to the experience. We fundamentally are looking at a fundamental shift in experience. We are not ready for that yet. And to your point is that the way we look at UI, we still design that for a different demographics than what the design is going to be. The reason I talk about that is, how long have we been talking about transference of wealth? Like years that we have been talking about that, and like, oh my God, it's going to happen tomorrow.
The
Oh
great
my
wealth
God, it's
transfer?
going to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Buckets
right.
of think that's not going to happen for 20 years, that it's completely overblown, and that, people are just not dying. That's what's happening.
Right.
Yeah.
And so your investor profile, your advisor profile is not changing.
That's right.
It is not fundamentally changing. So how should we now tailor our experiences in a way which is, to your point, like, James, as you were saying, just like I do not use the keyboard, but there is a new way for me to interact, which is voice, right? And so that is where, Mark, I feel that fundamentally the experience, digital experience is going to shift, and AI is the most important, which is going to change that. How we interact with AI is going to fundamentally change. The screen layout, how we think about it, it's going to fundamentally change. It's like, if you think about the older financial services products, it's all about throw as much data on screen as possible with no idea why you are doing, because it's not purpose driven. If you look at any of the UI, it is not purpose driven. You haven't asked the question, what are you trying to do? What are the 3 things you want to do, right? And I want to talk about the client portal we are building, because I'm super excited about that, where we are bringing in the real-time data plus the end of day data from the performance systems and just marrying it all, and it's super easy. The most important question I ask there is if I have my investor come to that client portal, what are the 3 things? They want to know where they are. They want to know what they need to do. They want to know what the advisors are doing. That's it. Do not throw thousands of things and graphs and charts and all that stuff. All our banking sites are like that. All our brokerage sites are like that, because it was built with old tech, because we didn't think about the experience. And Mark, that is where AI is fundamentally changing the experience. And that is why we will see a big revolution in the next 3 years. I would not be surprised if all our UI is going to fundamentally shift.
And
So
be
what does
more
that look
voice-based. That's interesting.
It can be voice-based, because conversational UI can be voice-based, right?
Yep.
And how you're actually seeing data is going to be fundamentally different than how you point, click, 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 and all that stuff. Fundamentally, how we use workflows are going to change. And we are really going into a different era. And even our screen designs are going to fundamentally change. It's not going to be information overload. It's all going to be, what is your experience? What are you trying to solve? What are the 3 things?
Yeah, let me put it up here. Hopefully I got the right one. We'll find out in a second. All
It's a
right.
high-risk game.
It
High-risk
is.
game of
It
screen
is.
sharing. Yeah.
Yeah, so mine's from Peter Nolan, who I've been reading and commenting on a lot of his posts very recently, because he's head of asset and wealth management over at Anthropic. I also saw he'll be at Future Proof in the next couple of weeks, and I think lots of people probably want to chat with him for various reasons. I was reading one of his posts earlier where he was digging into like compliance and what would make it easier to get tools like Claude in the door. So that was an interesting one as well. But here's one where they're talking about really the wealth management tools and financial advice tools that they've now launched that are part of Anthropic. So after 60 days at Anthropic, one thing is clearer than ever: AI will never replace financial advisors. I kind of feel like that's a little CYA. We're not going to replace you. But anyway, Claude is already the best in the world at analyzing investment portfolios, optimize a financial plan, recommending insurance, retirement, and other products. But what it can't do is build trust through human connection. understand family dynamics, emotions, and life goals, sit with the client through fear, loss, or market panic. We're not building to replace advisors, we're building to empower them. So this is an interesting article. I was kind of curious, less so about the article and more so about the comments, to see how people are reacting to it. But it seems largely positive, and they're focusing on like who you should connect with, and they're trying to solve problems already with like you should connect to custodians, you should do account opening. But any hot takes or immediate feedback from either of you, Mark, Churni?
I'll tell you one thing, my gut reaction based on this is it's all about trusted relationship, right? And when AI builds a trusted relationship which is stronger than a human, we will move to AI. It is inevitable, right? So when I see my son who is constantly interrogating that, hey, my teacher taught me this, and I like, if you're asking about better understanding, it's one thing. But if you're asking about like, what is your point of view and your point of view better than my teacher, then they will gravitate towards AI. If that happens, when you trust AI more than a human for this particular thing, then you will move towards that. But when you can trust human, and that is where humanity is getting challenged by AI right now, is what does that mean? And Mark, to your point, it doesn't matter 120 or 240. It is all what matters is the relationship real? Or are you just reading a script and just saying something which AI can do better? You know what I'm saying? That,
Mhm.
oh, I just read about your wife's birthday and your anniversary and all that stuff, and I'm pretending to have a relationship with you. AI will do that better. But your value, when your value of trusted relationship is more than what an AI can get, you cannot be beaten. And that is where I think we are headed. So it's very interesting. And that's where that human connection, I think we as humanity is getting challenged. And it's super awesome for me to just live in this world to see what is real.
So here's a question I have. So as the head of product at a platform that is both using AI, or that is using AI, how do you see firms like Anthropic, like OpenAI? Obviously, you're probably using their models to a large extent under the hood to power things, but beyond that, I mean, are these threats, or are these collaborators?
There are huge opportunities. To me, they are the reason we are now unconstrained. And if I do not embrace their power, that means I'm behind. You know what I'm saying? That
Mhm.
they are letting me do something. But if I think they're the what, I'm going to lose. If I use them as the how, I'm going to win.
But then what if they become the what? I mean, this is the fundamental challenge. If Anthropic goes up market, or rather upstream, and becomes the UI, I mean, this is, I guess, the challenge that a lot of the SaaS players are having, right? I think
Yes,
I have
yes.
this tweeted draft breaking. Anthropic announces Claude Workout. It just won't just suggest work push-ups. It'll carefully reason whether you should do them, and Planet Fitness is going to go down 20%. Like, I think the question is whether these tools will actually end up going, Anthropic launches a skill. That skill may be ultimately very much the same as using a SaaS tool. And then what happens to the SaaS tool if the Anthropic skill is so useful?
It will be bigger disruption than we know, but if
Yeah.
Anthropic can understand the experience, then they will be unbeatable.
Yeah.
Why Amplify succeeds is because we understand the experience and we can design the experience. You know what I'm saying? If Anthropic can really come and say, just like, okay, now I've gained all your years of knowledge of business, of how to interact with the customers. You know exactly what the customer wants and advisor wants, and I can build a better experience, they will win.
Right.
But that is where my domain knowledge is the value.
And do you subscribe to the view that people will be building their own experiences within these firms shortly? I mean, maybe not the advisors, but maybe the operations teams or the IT teams within the
They
advisors?
should. They absolutely should. Think about what type of thing what can be done, right?
Mm, mm.
Right? I mean, you need to have some sort of an autonomy. I mean, there are too many people who are sitting and still doing reconciliation, data analysis, and all that stuff. They should start building their own experience for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting.
There was a great post earlier. I remember his first name, Andy. I'm totally spacing on his last name. If you listen, Andy, I'm sorry. But he posted a video, which I thought was awesome, of like, hey, look, here's something I did. I had a very specific client with a very specific need. And in 7 minutes using Claude Cowork, I built them their own like custom app
Mhm.
that addressed their specific like financial needs. And he showed what he built and scrolled through it and stuff like that, and talked about how he thinks like this is going to allow him or other advisors to build like customization potentially at the client level. And I have some thoughts on that being both good and bad. And, there's maintenance that goes on top of that and other things. But like that was such a great demonstration, I thought, of like an advisor taking initiative, showing how like these tools, when you adopt them and think about them as like, how do I deliver a better experience, is put to really good use.
It is, as long as you are really, really careful about data governance. And
Yeah,
that's why I
that's
always
what we
come back
talked
to data, right?
about. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Solve
interesting.
that and solve
I
your
mean,
data.
in my
Yeah.
experience, the firms I talk to are very careful about data governance. The individuals I talk to are not.
Exactly.
And that's really where there's an interesting dichotomy.
That's exactly right. Right?
Yeah. So I wonder which way it's going to go, right? Because if the cost to develop the human, time cost and the financial cost of developing software goes down dramatically, you might get into a situation where individuals are creating a lot of new things. And I think that'll be a very different world. And yeah, I think that's where OpenClaw actually had sort of an interesting insight, which is you don't need to build new UI interfaces. You just need to tell something in text to do something and it'll do it. I find that an interesting approach. So I do need to go. So I'm going to bring us to a close. But I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your insights and really.
But
This was a
I
fun one.
enjoyed it so much. Thank you so much.
Thanks for
Well,
coming on, Churni. It was great chatting with you, and best of luck as you continue over at Amplify.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. You will see how we disrupt the world.
forward to
Looking
seeing what you
forward
build
to it.
next.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks.